You've been doing it every single spring. You walk into the garden center, you grab the bags, the granules, the liquid concentrate, the slow-release spikes, you load them into your cart, you go home, you feed your garden, and for about 6 weeks, everything looks incredible. Then, midsummer hits. The leaves start yellowing, the blooms get smaller, the energy drops out of your soil like someone pulled a plug. So you feed it again, and then again in fall to prepare it for winter, and then again next spring because last year's application is long gone. You are not building a garden. You are maintaining a dependency. Your plants are not thriving, they are waiting for their next dose. That is not a typo. The average gardener spends over $200 a year on fertilizer for a garden that should be feeding itself. $200. And here is the part nobody at the garden center will ever say out loud. Most of that fertilizer is solving a problem that the right plants would eliminate permanently. Not temporarily, not seasonally, permanently. There are 9 perennials, most of which your neighbors have never even considered planting that fix nitrogen directly from the air, mine deep minerals no fertilizer can reach, and deposit organic matter into your soil every single year without you doing a single thing. Some of them feed the plants around them through their root systems. Some of them break down into compost so rich that experienced growers treat them like liquid gold. And the one at number 1, the one I'm saving for last, is the plant that changed the way I think about soil entirely. I have watched it transform depleted, compacted ground into dark, living earth in a single season. It is sitting in my garden right now doing work I used to pay for. We're going to go through all 9. I'm counting them down, and the further we get, the more powerful they become. By the end of this, you are going to understand why buying fertilizer for a perennial garden is one of the most expensive habits in gardening, and exactly what to plant instead. Let's go. Before we get into the list, if you are the kind of gardener who wants a garden that actually builds itself instead of draining your wallet season after season, hit subscribe. That is exactly what this channel is for, and this list is exactly the kind of thing I post here regularly. And drop a comment right now. I want to know, what are you currently feeding your garden, and how often? Bags, liquid, nothing at all? Tell me, because by the end of this video, your answer might completely change. All right, plant number 9. Plant #9 Comfrey. Most people walk right past Comfrey at the nursery. Big leafy plant, purple flowers, looks almost like a weed. Experienced growers see something completely different. They see infrastructure. On the surface, Comfrey is a fast-growing perennial that produces enormous leaves from spring straight through to frost. You can cut it all the way to the ground multiple times in a single season, and it comes back harder every single time. It doesn't die back weakly. It returns with more mass, more leaves, more output. Most plants punish you for cutting them. Comfrey rewards you for it. Here is the golden detail. Comfrey's roots descend over 6 feet into the earth, far deeper than any fertilizer you will ever apply. Far deeper than your topsoil even goes. Down there, in the mineral-dense subsoil that your other plants cannot reach, Comfrey is pulling up potassium, phosphorus, calcium, and trace minerals and transporting them up into its leaves. When you cut those leaves and lay them directly on your beds as mulch, they break down in under 2 weeks, releasing a nutrient profile that rivals commercial liquid concentrate. Experienced organic growers call it homemade fertilizer on legs. Some call it the most useful plant in the garden. Both are right. Plant Comfrey in a permanent location and mean it. The roots are deep, brittle, and nearly impossible to fully remove once established. Every small fragment left in the ground will regenerate. That is not a cautionary tale. That is the design. Zones 3-9, full sun to part shade, give each plant at least 3 feet of space. Key mistake to avoid: planting it in the center of a bed. Put it at the edge or border where you can harvest the leaves freely without trampling everything around it. Treat it like the workhorse it is, give it a dedicated station, and let it run. Plant Lupine. This one surprises almost everyone the first time they understand the mechanism behind it, not just what it looks like, but what it is actually doing underground while you admire the flowers. Lupine is one of the most visually striking perennials you can grow. Tall, dramatic spires of purple, pink, white, and bicolor blooms rising up in late spring and early summer. It draws attention from across the garden. Most people grow it for exactly that reason, the look. They have no idea they are also running a subterranean fertilizer operation at the same time. Here is the golden detail. Lupine is a legume, and like all legumes, it has formed an ancient evolutionary partnership with soil bacteria called rhizobia. These bacteria colonize the root system of lupine and live inside small nodules attached to the roots. Their job, their entire biological purpose, is to pull nitrogen gas directly out of the surrounding air in the soil and convert it into ammonium, a form of nitrogen that plants can immediately absorb and use. When lupine dies back at the end of the season, or when you cut it down and turn it under, those nitrogen-packed root nodules release directly into your soil. One well-established lupine planting can fix up to 100 pounds of nitrogen per acre annually. You are not buying fertility. You are growing it. Zones 4-8 prefers slightly acidic, well-drained soil. Direct sow the seeds. Lupine has a deep taproot from germination and resents being moved. Scarify the seeds lightly before planting to improve germination rates. Key mistake to avoid: fertilizing the soil before or after planting. If your ground is already nitrogen-rich, the rhizobia bacteria have no incentive to activate. The plant feeds from the bag instead of from the air, and the entire nitrogen-fixing mechanism sits dormant. Plant lupine in lean soil. Let it do the work it was built for. Plant #7 Siberian pea shrub. Most people have never heard this name. That is close to a tragedy in practical gardening terms, because what this plant does in difficult conditions is something almost nothing else will attempt. It presents as a large, open shrub, airy and architectural, with small, bright green compound leaves and cheerful yellow pea-like flowers in spring. It is handsome without being showy, tough without looking it, and almost completely absent from mainstream garden centers, which tells you everything about why mainstream gardens are still buying fertilizer. Here is the golden detail. Siberian pea shrub is one of the most cold-hardy and aggressive nitrogen fixers in the entire temperate plant world. It thrives in Zone 2 conditions that eliminate most of the plants on this list entirely. It was adopted early and enthusiastically by permaculture food forest designers, specifically because it rebuilds soil in the harshest, most depleted conditions where the recovery process needs to start from almost nothing. In severely compacted, nutrient-stripped, or heavily eroded ground, Siberian pea shrub does not merely survive, it initiates the biological sequence that makes the ground capable of supporting everything else. Think of it as a soil paramedic. It goes in first. It stabilizes the patient, and then everything else can follow. Zones 2-7, exceptionally drought-tolerant once roots are established, performs best in poor, sandy, or gravelly soils rather than rich, amended beds. Use it as a windbreak, a property border, or the outermost structural layer of a food garden or orchard system. Key mistake to avoid: planting it in well-fertilized, amended soil. Like lupine, its nitrogen-fixing performance is highest under mild stress. Give it the hard ground. That is where it earns its place. Plant #6 Stinging Nettle. I already know what half of you are thinking. Stay with me for 60 seconds, because the gardeners who figured this one out stopped buying fertilizer entirely. Stinging nettle looks like a problem. It spreads, it stings, and if you have ever blundered into a patch of it barefoot, you have a strong and lasting opinion about it. I understand. But set that aside for a moment and look at what this plant actually contains, because the chemistry is extraordinary. Here is the golden detail. Stinging nettle has one of the highest concentrations of bioavailable iron, nitrogen, magnesium, sulfur, and potassium of any plant in the temperate world. When you harvest the leaves with gloves, obviously, and steep them submerged in water for 10 to 14 days, you produce a liquid fertilizer called nettle tea that experienced organic growers have used for centuries as a complete plant feed. The nutrient concentrations in properly brewed nettle tea are measurably comparable to many commercial liquid fertilizers. Comparable to a product you are currently paying for. Made from a plant that requires zero maintenance, spreads on its own, and returns every single year with more vigor than the year before. There is a reason this has been in the organic grower's toolkit since before organic growing had a name. Zones 3, 10 grows in almost any moist, reasonably fertile soil, spreads by both seed and rhizome. If you want to manage its spread, sink a container into the ground and plant it inside that it will fill the container and stay put. Harvest the top third of the plant before it flowers for the highest nutrient concentration. Key mistake to avoid: removing it every time it appears at the garden edge. You are spending hours per season fighting a plant that is actively trying to feed your garden. Stop fighting it. Learn to direct it. Plant #5 white clover. This is the one that is going to sting a little because the odds are good that you have spent time and money removing this plant from your lawn, which means you have been pulling out a nitrogen factory and then paying to replace the nitrogen it was providing. White clover is low-growing, spreads horizontally by stolons, and produces small white globe flowers that pollinators' bees especially treat like a destination. It looks like a ground cover. It functions like a soil engine running quietly beneath everything you can see. Here is the golden detail. White clover fixes nitrogen at a documented rate of 100 to 200 pounds per acre per year. The same rhizobia partnership as lupine, operating at ground level and feeding the root zones of every plant growing in its immediate vicinity. But here is the detail that most sources leave out. White clover's nitrogen contribution is not just released at death. Research has shown that actively growing clover releases nitrogen compounds into the surrounding soil in real time through root exudates, meaning the plants next to it are being fed continuously, not just when the clover is turned under. Vegetables and perennials established near white clover patches have shown measurable growth and yield increases with zero additional fertilizer inputs. It is feeding your garden right now, today, in real time, and asking for absolutely nothing in return. Zones 310, sun to part shade, tolerates foot traffic better than most ground covers, establishes quickly from seed broadcast directly onto bare or lightly scarified ground. Key mistake to avoid: mowing it before it has flowered. The nitrogen fixation is most biologically active during and immediately following the bloom period. Let it flower first. The bees will thank you, and so will your soil. Plant #4 Yarrow. Yarrow is the plant that experienced gardeners use as a system component, not a decoration. If you have ever grown it and treated it only as a pretty flower, you have been leaving most of its value on the table. It blooms in wide, flat-topped flower clusters, white, yellow, salmon, deep red from early summer well into fall. The foliage is feathery, aromatic, and silver green. It tolerates drought, poor soil, and neglect with equal indifference. It is extraordinarily tough. But toughness is the least interesting thing about yarrow. Here is the golden detail. Yarrow does not fix nitrogen. What it does is arguably more sophisticated. Yarrow releases specific biochemical compounds from its root system and decomposing plant matter that directly stimulate microbial activity in the surrounding soil. More microbial activity means faster nutrient cycling, meaning the plants around yarrow gain access to a greater proportion of what is already present in your soil, nutrients that would otherwise remain locked in forms they cannot absorb. One published study found that yarrow's presence measurably increased essential oil content in neighboring herb plantings, a direct biological indicator of improved mineral uptake at the root level. It is not adding nutrients to your system. It is making your system more efficient at using what it already has. That is a more advanced contribution than most plants on this list. Zones 3-9, full sun, well-drained soil. This is non-negotiable. Yarrow in waterlogged or heavy clay soil loses its vigor rapidly and stops providing the root chemistry that makes it valuable. Space plants 18 to 24 inches apart and allow them to naturalize. Key mistake to avoid: cutting it back too hard too early. Leave the spent flower stems through autumn. They continue releasing root compounds as the plant senesces, and that late-season contribution matters more than a tidy garden bed. Quick pause here before we get into the final three. Drop a comment right now and tell me, are you currently using any plants in your garden to feed your soil, or has it all been coming out of a bag? I genuinely want to know where people are starting from. because what's coming in the last 3 entries is going to completely reframe how you think about soil fertility. These are not common. These are not what the garden center is pushing. And one of them fixes nitrogen in conditions where almost nothing else will, while producing one of the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet at the same time. Number 3. Let's go. Plant #3 Groundnut, Hopniss. What's coming in the last 3 is where this list becomes something most gardeners have never encountered. Number 3 is a plant that fed entire civilizations, was nearly lost to mainstream horticulture, and is now being rediscovered by soil scientists for reasons that go far beyond food. Groundnut, also called Hopniss, is a vining perennial native to North America. It produces edible tubers underground and beautiful clusters of fragrant reddish-brown flowers above ground. It was a primary food source for indigenous peoples across the eastern continent, and one of the first plants the pilgrims learned to eat. Here is the golden detail. Groundnut is a nitrogen-fixing legume. But unlike most nitrogen fixers, it produces a harvestable food crop at the same time it's building your soil. The tubers are high in protein, 3 times the protein content of potatoes, and the plant returns and expands every single year without replanting. You are simultaneously running a soil enrichment program and growing food. No other plant on this list does both at once. Zones 3-7 prefers moist, slightly acidic soil, grows best with something to climb. Plant the tubers in spring, 2 inches deep. Key mistake: harvesting all the tubers the first year. Leave at least half in the ground. The plant needs its energy reserves to come back stronger and begin its nitrogen-fixing work in year 2. Plant #2 C Buckthorn. This one has a devoted following among permaculture designers and almost zero presence in mainstream gardening. That gap is about to close. C. Buckthorn is a thorny, deciduous shrub that produces dense clusters of bright orange berries along every branch. So many berries that the branches look like they're on fire in autumn. It is visually extraordinary. Here is the golden detail. C. Buckthorn is one of the most powerful nitrogen-fixing woody plants available to temperate gardeners. It forms actin-oryzal symbiosis, a rarer and less understood form of nitrogen fixation involving Frankia bacteria rather than rhizobia, which means it works in conditions and soil types where legume-based fixers struggle. It can fix up to 180 pounds of nitrogen per acre annually. And the berries contain more vitamin C than oranges, more vitamin E than wheat germ, and a complete omega fatty acid profile that has made them a major ingredient in the European functional food market. Your soil amendment is also a superfood. Plant 1 male for every 6 to 7 females for fruiting. Zones 3-7, full sun, tolerates salt, drought, and poor soils. Thrives where other shrubs fail. Key mistake: planting only females. Without a male pollinator within 200 feet, you get 0 fruit and miss half the reason this plant exists. Plant Comfrey, the full reveal. I told you at the start there was one plant that changed the way I think about soil entirely. That changed the way I think about what a garden even is. You met Comfrey at number 9. I put it there so you would have context for what I am about to say now. Comfrey is not a fertilizer plant. That is too small a category for what it does. Comfrey is a nutrient pump, a biological elevator that descends below the living zone of your topsoil into the cold, mineral-dense subsoil beneath it, and brings what is down there up into the world your plants actually inhabit. Every leaf it grows is loaded with what it pulled from 6 feet underground. Every leaf that falls, every cutting you lay on a bed, every stem that breaks down where it stands, that is the subsoil feeding your surface, continuously, automatically, for free. No bag of fertilizer has ever done that. No bag of fertilizer goes 6 feet down to get what your plants actually need. You are applying fertility from the outside. Comfrey is generating it from within the system, and it does this for the rest of your life. You plant it once. That is the last decision you ever make about it. The master lesson. Here is what these 9 plants are really telling you. Soil fertility is not a product. It has never been a product. It is a relationship between roots and bacteria, between deep minerals and surface plants, between what dies this season and what feeds the next one. That relationship has been running in healthy ecosystems for millions of years without any intervention from anyone. The fertilizer industry did not invent plant nutrition. It interrupted it and then sold you the replacement. Every plant on this list is a way back into that original relationship. Lupine and Clover partner with bacteria to pull nitrogen from the air. Siberian pea shrub rebuilds soil that industry and neglect have stripped to nothing. Nettle mines and concentrates what is already present. Yarrow makes the whole system more efficient at feeding itself. And Comfrey ties it all together, reaching down, pulling up, and depositing wealth into the living layer where your garden actually grows. What you are building with these 9 plants is not a fertilizer schedule. It is a self-funding system, one that gets richer every single year, one that compounds, one that your grandchildren could inherit and find more productive than the day you planted it. The bag feeds your garden for 6 weeks. These plants feed it forever. That is not a gardening tip. That is a completely different understanding of what soil is and what a garden can be. Your neighbors are going to notice, and when they ask what you're adding, the answer is nothing. Not anymore. If this list gave you something useful, a plant you hadn't considered, a mechanism you didn't know existed, a reason to put the fertilizer bag back on the shelf, hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, and what it does is tell YouTube that this kind of information is worth showing to more gardeners who are still out there paying for something these plants do for free. 1 tap. Real impact. And if this is the way you want to think about gardening, not as a maintenance cycle you fund every season, but as a system you build once and benefit from for decades, subscribe. That is exactly what this channel is. Every video here is built around the same principle you saw today. Work with what nature already does, and let the garden do the heavy lifting. Now, the next video. If you watch this and you're thinking, okay, I want to plant some of these, but I don't have ground space. I'm working with containers or raised beds. I made that video specifically for you. It covers exactly which of these nitrogen-fixing perennials translate to container and raised bed systems, how to combine them so they feed each other, and the one pairing that experienced growers use to turn a small raised bed into a self-fertilizing ecosystem in a single season. That is worth watching before you buy another bag of anything. It's queued up next. Now go plant something. The season is open. The ground is ready. Let's go.